Greetings, fellow alchemists, and welcome to Wordplay Wizardry. Over the last few videos, we've covered a lot of the elements that go into character creation. Hopefully, you enjoyed the multi-part style, as I've got another one for you. In this group of videos, I want to cover world building. Why is this such an important point, you might ask? Well, if your story is not set in our world, you'll have to make it. If it is set in our world, but you've got some fantastical elements, you'll still need some of this, because you'll have to define those elements. But, that having been said, this is going to be primarily for those working in the fantasy, science fiction, and quite possibly historical genres. However, if you are creating a story set in our world, this can still be beneficial to you. You may not be doing the creating part, but you can still describe it. And this will help you do that. World building happens through two different methods: top-down or bottom-up. Or, if you're familiar with Dungeons & Dragons, outside-in and inside-out. And what do they mean? Generally speaking, they refer to where you start building. Do you begin with the land itself, with the political structure, climate, overall technological level, history? This is top-down, creating the biggest pieces first, and then moving towards the finer details. Conversely, if you start with the small details first, property, town layouts, specific technology, culture, and social structure, you're taking a bottom-up approach. In the beginning of the story, your main character will most likely be dealing with a small focus, a village or a town, and then they go out from there. Now, it is certainly possible to start from a wider point of view, to see the grand stage of the world you've created, that your story is set in, and then zoom in on one particular person, the main character. But that's story structure. And before we get to that, we need a setting. According to Tolkien, the goal of world building is immersion. As you might imagine, he's exactly right. But then he is Tolkien after all. Successful world building creates a setting that is as real as our own. It feels both alive and functional. So what does it take to get to that level? Well, let's back up a second. If you were to describe our world to someone, how would you do it? Where would you start? A good exercise to get into the process is to practice on our world. Start with your country and describe it. As you do so, get as detailed as possible. Could you or someone else go online and look up these details? Of course. But for this, you're looking at it from a literary standpoint, meaning you need to make it feel alive with words, and not just like the contents of a report. Now, something that will help you describe this new world a bit better is being familiar with a few terms. So let's start with those. I'm not going to list every term, at least not in this video, but I will give an overview. And maybe the best place to begin is with the land itself, namely geography and climate. Geography refers to the terrain of your world, the overall look and feel of the land. Is it a continent? An island? Are there mountains? Plains? Deserts? How big is it? For climate, not only does this refer to the temperature and weather, but also to the biomes as well. If you're not familiar with the term, biome refers to the flora and fauna occupying a specific area. So, what are the plants and animals in a forest biome? In a tropical biome? How do the plants and animals change based on where they live? Deeper still, if you have several forests in your world, are they the same biome, Or is each slightly different? Its own self-contained biome? Do they share animals and plants? Or do they have their own unique species? Now, once you have a map and some basics for the biomes, you can start plopping down towns and cities. If your story involves humans, you know, generally speaking, what type of environments humans can usually inhabit. If your story has races other than humans, such as elves, you'll need to be able to describe what kind of biome they can occupy. Another example would be a science fiction story. What type of biome can alien life live in? Are they on a dry biome? Are they in a wet biome or an ocean biome? Is it something that is difficult for humans to occupy? But let's stay in science fiction for just a moment. If yours is a story set in space, we'll need to go a little further out, namely planet crafting. A lot of what you'll do here is speculation, since we really only know a fraction of what's beyond our solar system. So you have a little more leeway when it comes to creating. However, what you will need to do is add in some modifiers. Atmosphere, for one, and some base elements. Earth has an oxygen-based atmosphere and silicate-based land with large liquid water oceans, and it orbits a main sequence yellow star. Seems simple because we live on it, but with literally hundreds of billions of stars and planets, you can adjust some of those elements. Perhaps you want a race of people who exist on a world that's atmosphere is primarily carbon dioxide, or maybe a world that is similar to ours, but orbits a red giant star. All of that is up to you to decide. For my series, Star Runner, this is what I had to do when coming up with the various races. I had to look at their homeworlds and what shaped their evolution to the point that we currently find in the story. But let's back up to a particular world and discuss some of the elements there. One thing to bear in mind is that climate often shapes the landscape, and vice versa. On Earth, there are 5 main climates, with a number of subclimates. Those climates are tropical, dry, temperate, continental, polar. Tropical is hot and humid and gets lots of rainfall every year. Typically, this is associated with equatorial latitudes on our world. Think Florida in the United States or the Caribbean. Dry usually refers to desert conditions. There's very little precipitation and a large percentage of moisture evaporates not only into the ground, but into the air as well. In the United States, this would be places like Arizona. Other good examples would be North Africa or Western Asia. Temperate is a blend of hot and cold. It has warm to hot summers and cool to cold winters. It has an average amount of rainfall and gets both thunderstorms and snowfall. In the United States, this would be the Midwest. Now, before moving on, I want to bring up a phenomenon called a split climate. And an example of split climate is a Mediterranean zone. This is not one of the main 5, but it is worth noting. It is also known as a dry summer zone with warm to hot summers and mild winters. Examples include, as you might imagine, the Mediterranean Sea region, as well as Southern California in the United States. The continental climate has warm to cool summers and cold to frigid winters. Frigid refers to -30 to -40 degrees Celsius or -22 to -40 degrees Fahrenheit. Examples of this would be Canada, northeastern United States, Russia, and Scandinavia. A polar climate is, as you imagine, near the poles of the planet. Polar regions are by far the coldest on Earth. They have summer temperatures that never reach above 50 degrees Fahrenheit or 10 degrees Celsius. Polar regions are hallmarked by tundras and glaciers. Examples would be the extreme northern regions of Alaska in the United States, the northern regions of Canada and Russia, as well as Antarctica. And each of these climate regions have specific biome types associated with them. So, a forest biome will usually be found in a temperate zone or continental zone, as opposed to a dry or polar zone. Is that required? No, that's just the way it is here on Earth. But if you plan on having a forest in a frigid polar region, you'll have to figure out a way that the trees grow in such extreme temperatures. Understanding the climate of your world allows you to understand the biomes of your world, and therefore the flora and fauna inhabitants. But for all cases, do a little research into Earth's climates and biomes, and go from there. In space, things work largely the same way, but, as I said, usually on a much bigger scale. You're not doing this for one planet. You're doing this for multiple planets. Of course, if you include space stations, the work gets a little easier. Why? The climate and biomes there are all artificial. So, a greenhouse on a space station can grow whatever you like, because they can change the climate within the greenhouse. The same goes for an enclosed colony on an otherwise inhospitable world. Take our own solar system, Mars specifically. While we couldn't grow crops outside, we could have an entire forest inside in a dome. If you create a big enough structure, you can fill it with just about anything. Giant redwoods on a space station? Certainly plausible if said station had the room, which in this case means a dome that is at least 100 meters or 400 feet tall. What's that look like? Picture a dome over the Great Pyramids of Giza. Another thing to do is to familiarize yourself with the names of various land formations. What is the difference between an atoll and an archipelago? Between a plateau and a mesa? What are the four wetlands? What's the difference between an ocean and a sea? A fjord and a canyon? A canal and a strait? A cove, a bay, and a gulf? There are quite a few land formations with subtle differences between many. So your best bet is do a little research so you can understand those differences. And yes, knowing those names and the differences and knowing the biomes and climates and understanding how everything works and how everything functions puts you in the realm of dipping your toe into becoming a geomorphologist and a climatologist. That's just how it works. In order to be accurate, we must understand, even if it's only for a story. We learn, we use, and sometimes we forget knowledge. And that's okay. You don't always need all the lessons you learn. Though if you do pick up a little along the way, all the better. You've grown. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, when I started this video, I intended to do a basic overview of everything that is required for world building, all the various elements. but we've just talked about land and climate. So let's end this video, and we'll pick up next time with some deeper details. Thanks for tuning in. As always, if there's something you'd like to see in greater detail, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're enjoying what you see, leave a comment. Until next time, fellow alchemists, take care.